Chicken stock is one of the most widely used ingredients in all of cooking, yet so many people don't even bother to take the time to learn how to make it themselves. So today I'm going to show you just how simple it can actually be to make a delicious homemade chicken stock that'll far surpass anything you would find at the store. So with chicken stock, you can pretty much make it as simple or as complex as you like by varying the types of meats and vegetables you include, whether or not you roast your ingredients, and so on. But today we're just going to keep it super simple, which will result in an easy to make, extremely versatile stock. And you'll also be able to build upon it in the future if you so choose. So for this recipe, all you'll need is some spare chicken parts along with a small assortment of vegetables and herbs. In this case, we're using onions, carrots, celery, thyme, parsley, and bay leaves, along with a few black peppercorns and just about a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. You can pretty much use any spare chicken parts you have, whether it be backbones, wingtips, carcasses, but you do just want to make sure that at least half of your chicken parts are raw. The raw parts have a lot more gelatin compared to the cooked ones, so this is going to make a huge difference in improving the body of your final product. So before we head over to the stove, we'll just need to very roughly chop the vegetables. So I'll just peel my carrots and cut them into large pieces, then cut my celery in the same way. Now I'll just cut my onions into quarters. Don't worry about removing the skin because the vegetables are all going to get strained out at the end anyways. And that's really all the preparation you need to do for this recipe. So let's head over to the stove and get started. So first, just get out the largest stock pot you have, and in this case, I'm using an 8-quart stock pot. I like to use 1.5 quarts of water for every pound of chicken parts. So I have about 3.5 pounds of chicken parts here, which means I'll be using 5 1/4 quarts of water. So just add all of your ingredients to the water except for the vinegar and bring the water to a boil over high heat. You can see that I slightly overestimated the size of my pot, so I just had to remove a bit of water here to make room. Don't worry if it seems like a lot of water, because a good portion of it will end up evaporating as you simmer, which is going to concentrate the flavor of the stock. As you saw earlier, I'm using 2 stalks of celery, 2 carrots, and 2 onions. It's not an exact science here, so feel free to use whatever amount feels right for you. You'll also notice that I didn't add any salt, and there's a specific reason for that. You can always add salt to whatever dish you end up using the stock for, so in order to keep it versatile, I'd never recommend adding salt to your stock. So as the water starts to boil, you'll see some foam rise to the top, so you'll just want to skim it off and get rid of it. Turn your burner down to low to reduce the stock to a simmer and add your teaspoon of vinegar. Just give the mixture a light stir, but be careful not to stir too aggressively. We want our final product to be a nice clear stock, so we're trying to avoid mixing in all of the particles. So now we're just going to let this simmer uncovered for about 5 to 7 hours. Leaving it uncovered will allow some of the water to evaporate, which will concentrate the flavor of the stock. You can pretty much just leave it alone at this point, but I'd recommend checking on it now and then to be sure that it stays at a simmer. Because if it begins to boil too aggressively, all of the particles will start to mix in and make the stock cloudier, which we don't want. The next step is just to hit the like button on this video and subscribe if you haven't already. So about 3 hours in, you can see that the stock is developing some nice color, and you'll notice that some of the water has started to evaporate. Optionally, you can give it a quick stir at this point, but again, just make sure to be gentle with it. So after about 5 hours of simmering, the ingredients have had plenty of time to release their flavors into the stock, and it's ready to remove from the burner. You can simmer it for longer if you really want to create the most flavorful stock possible, but I found that it doesn't make a huge difference past this point. Plus, the added time just allows more water to evaporate, which will reduce the total amount of stock you end up with. So I prefer to stick with just 5 or 6 hours. So now we'll just need to strain out all of the ingredients. They've already flavored the stock, so their job is done. We just want to be left with a nice clean stock. So I like to remove the larger ingredients first using a pair of tongs, then just strain out the rest using a fine mesh strainer set over a large bowl. Again, I probably should have used a larger bowl for this, but I underestimated the amount of stock that I actually had. So once everything is strained out, you'll notice that a layer of fat has risen to the top of your stock. So we'll just need to skim this off. I like to save this fat for potential use in the future, so I'm going to skim it off with a spoon into a mason jar, which I'll then store in my fridge. You can see that I ended up skimming off some stock along with the fat, but that's pretty much unavoidable. If you did it more carefully than I did, you could reduce the amount of waste, but in my opinion, it's not worth the extra work just to salvage a tiny bit of extra stock. So anyways, I like to divide this stock out into several small containers for easy portioning during future usage. And if you're making this much stock, you're probably not going to use it all right away, so I like to store some in my freezer as well. And if you want to see how to make my favorite roasted chicken recipe, which by the way will leave you with some extra parts to make stock with, you can check that out right here. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you over there.